Laurel and Hardy, Bob Hope and Bing Crosby, R2D2 and C-3PO. Iconic film duos that last generations. A lot of people today forget this, but when Star Wars came out in 1977, it was truly a cultural phenomenon, the likes of which only comes once in a generation, if at all. Star Wars was an immediate and instant smash hit success that broke records and everyone went fucking insane over it. So, obviously, out of all the characters in Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, the most popular and immediately recognizable were R2D2 and C-3PO, the two humorous comic relief droids. Obviously, this was before the Ewoks, so Star Wars didn't have as many cute characters, but C-3PO and R2D2 were positively adorable, and they were also the comic relief of the first movie and the two subsequent films, so of course, they were a huge smash hit, and I'm sure for Christmas in 1977, everyone was like, I want a fucking R2D2 action figure right here, right now. I want R2D2 and C-3PO so I can frickin' make up little games with them and shit and have them boop around on the planet of Tatooine. That's what I'm after. Ooh yeah. Obviously, with anything that's as successful as Star Wars was, there's bound to be tons of imitators and replicators and people trying to get some of that sweet, sweet payola. Everyone back in 1977 wanted a slice of that Star Wars pie. So for the entirety of the late 70s, you saw just a ton of fake Star Wars ripoffs. These Star Wars ripoffs aren't remembered very well today because, nothing can really be Star Wars in terms of just like how epic Star Wars is, the original trilogy and the prequels anyway. But they definitely have a bizarre cultural legacy that I think is worth recognizing. Obviously, all of these Star Wars ripoffs have ripoff R2D2s. Robots that are little and cute and designed to be funny or a comic relief or to break up the tension, and it never works to the same effect that it did in Star Wars because only R2D2 and C-3PO, I feel, really work as that type of character. I can't say that there are cases where I see a little robot bumbling around in one of these Star Wars wannabes, and I'm like, yeah, that guy's as iconic as frickin' R2D2. And in much the same way that, like, Gremlins spawned a whole little subgenre of shitty Gremlins ripoffs, like Ghoulies and Hobgoblins and whatever, where they just try and have gremlins, but they're called something different, and they're like little monsters that go around and run amok. That was the case with Star Wars for sure. So today, I'm counting down the top 5 R2D2 ripoffs. Get ready, this is going to be a pretty cool list, because I haven't seen anyone else do this. At number 5, we got the Daleks from Doctor Who. Now I know what you're saying. Nicholas, the Doctor Who was made in the 60s, way before Star Wars, and the Daleks also predate Star Wars. Well, I'm putting the Daleks on here just because the first time I ever saw a Dalek, like someone was wearing a Dalek t-shirt, and I was like, oh, it looks like R2D2. And they were like, no, actually, these are the Daleks. These are fascist murder machines from the planet Dalatron. And they combat the noble doctor in his crusade with the sonic screwdriver. And this was one of the first times I heard about Doctor Who as a franchise. Immediately, I just recognized that this fucking property was rotten to the core. That every single fan of it, much like with Rick and Morty, would be the most insufferable nerd possible. Like, Star Wars fans and Star Trek fans, normal people for the most part, because both properties are like freaking well written, well made. Doctor Who is a joke property where the fan base is just built around all the special effects looking like shit and all the acting being garbage, all the plots being campy as frick, and all the monsters looking like they're made out of paper mache. The Daleks being no exception, they look cheap as hell. I could go on about Doctor Who, how in opposition to Star Trek, which is a story about people exploring the cosmos and the limitations of humanity and overcoming those, Doctor Who is basically like if you gave Q from Star Trek an entire show and he could just go wherever he wanted and do whatever he wanted immediately, and it'd be boring as fuck. And obviously Star Trek recognizes that space deities who can magically do anything are boring characters, so they make Q an unlikable asshole. But over in Britain, Doctor Who is seen as some kind of great character who's cool as fuck and a total badass because he's fucking magic. And this is like, I think, something to do with the American mindset versus the British mindset. At the end of the day, that Americans, praise like achievements in humanity and people doing things, people doing important things towards colonizing the universe, whereas with Doctor Who, they worship a space deity because their leadership structure is based off the legend of the Sword and the Stone, and their entire government works around a fairy tale. And that's not exactly the type society that I would expect to make the most awe-inspiring science fiction. But that's kind of besides the point. I can't stand the Daleks, and I think the Daleks certainly qualify as R2D2 ripoffs. Definitely, after R2D2 rolled off the line in 1977, Doctor Who probably, changed the Daleks up a little bit to have them more like R2D2 and remind everyone a little more of R2D2. The coincidences really are too vast for me to count. I mean, they're both, little cylinder things. They both go around on wheels. Much like how every Doctor Who fan will be like, the Borg actually wasn't invented by Star Trek. It was actually the Cybermen first. The Borg ripped the Cybermen off. And it's like, no, the Cybermen ripped the Borg off after the Borg came around and Doctor Who felt the need to pretend like it invents this shit. When really everything in Doctor Who is just ripped off of 1950s science fiction, like The Day the Earth Stood Still or Invasion of the Body Snatchers or whatever. And while I don't hate 1950s science fiction, it's campy and goofy and whatever, we really have come a long way since then, and it's embarrassing to see a show that's 50 years old still acting like it's the Cold War era, and we're still making shit with big spiders and shit, and acting like this is a poignant statement or something. It's a joke. It's a joke of a franchise. It's a joke of a character. You can't have 12 guys playing the same guy and have a character with any sort of cohesion or point. He's not even a character. He's just 12 guys. 12 different guys. 13 guys or whatever. 12 guys and one lady. Needless to say, I think the Daleks are complete ass. I think their objective of going around and turning everyone into a Dalek or whatever, just a really terrible fascist analogy that is so blunt and so obvious, and it's like, oh, the Daleks, they're fascists. You know that? You see that? Isn't that cool? No, you can make such better societal commentary and shit. And it's a disappointment, as is everything with the Doctor Who property and brand. Everything about Doctor Who is just cringe, and it's a detriment to science fiction, and science fiction's reputation is a serious philosophical grounds. Anyway, moving on. At number 4, we have Vincent and Old Bob from The Black Hole.
Vincent's my name, sharpshooting's my game.
The Black Hole is a movie that I'll probably make an entire video on at some point. It's an example of a really terrible Disney property that is just a terrible example of science fiction. Almost as bad as Doctor Who in many respects. The Black Hole is an example of Disney trying to actually rip off Star Wars due to the success of Star Wars. This came out in 1979, 2 years after Star Wars, And this is a great example of how, if you actually look at old Lucasfilm, before Lucasfilm got bought out by Disney, like old Lucasfilm being so much more competent than Disney. It's a great example of just like how behind the times Disney was in every regard. The black hole feels very dated, even though it's from like 1979, which, as I've pointed out in the past, is the same year Alien came out, which I think is very funny. But the black hole feels like Lost in Space. Basically, it feels like it's trying to be Lost in Space, but the robots in it, Vincent and Old Bob, are definitely 100% beyond the shadow of a doubt trying to replicate the success of R2D2 with their stubby little frames and their little eyes. You have a very anthropomorphized look to them. Vincent is voiced by Roddy McDowall in what's undoubtedly his worst role, hands down. Actually, he was in a lot of Disney shit, so maybe all of that is his worst role, hands down, because he really is a great actor if he applies himself. But here, as this bobbing little robot, he's really degrading himself and showing just like how, just how terrible his standards are here. This is Roddy McDowall's worst role. The character of Old Bob is just one of the goofiest fucking ideas I've ever seen put to film. The black hole is often criticized as not being scientifically accurate. That's not something I particularly care about with science fiction. The black hole is just not a competent story. It's not a competent science fiction film in any way. Like, it just falls apart the more I think about it. For now, I'll stick to Vincent and Old Bob. They really have no chemistry. You look at them, they just look like freaking globes of shit. Like, I don't get who saw this and thought, oh yeah, all the Disney execs gathered in the boardroom like, yeah, those freaking R2D2 and C3PO toys are selling freaking huge. But these Vincent and Old Bob toys, these are gonna be even bigger. We're gonna sell so many of these. They're gonna be flying off the shelves. Everyone at Christmas will be like, I want an Old Bob figurine. I want a Vincent action figure. Unlike C3PO and R2D2 are like really well designed, really well crafted. You just look at C3PO and R2D2 and you think, wow, what design went into those guys? C3PO's like generator on his stomach and all the joints and wires and shit. R2D2 has all those buttons and beeps and boops and the little like retractable arm that comes out. So much design and thought went into that. And then you have like Vincent and Old Bob, who are just like these fucking floaty globe things. I don't get what Disney was thinking, thinking that these robots would be like popular with kids. Nobody gave a shit, obviously, because these guys are not rememberable or distinctive in any way, and they really failed to live up to the legacy that Star Wars set, which is why eventually Disney bought out Star Wars. But the black hole in itself is a story for another time. Just talking about the robots, they are absolutely like some of the dumbest robots I've ever seen in a movie. They add nothing to it. It's just like so stupid. What is Disney? What even are they? I don't even know. I don't get it. Alright, at number 3, we have Tilton Tilly from Star Odyssey.
Tilly, my treasure, are you all right?
Tilt, my dear, is that you? Are we in robot heaven?
Star Odyssey is a film most people probably haven't heard of. It's even more obscure than The Black Hole. It's an Italian science fiction film, and as with most 1970s sci-fi Italian films, or really any Italian film of any genre, it has a horrible, goofy-ass dub. But even without the dub, this is easily one of the goofiest science fiction movies ever made. I had this on DVD when I was extremely young. Crappy, like thrift store DVD where they just put these really cheap licensable movies on there, and it was just pure crap. And this was one of the first sci-fi movies I ever saw. Star Odyssey is not to be confused with Star Wars or 2001: A Space Odyssey, even though it's obviously pulling from the names of both. It is a extremely incompetent film in basically every regard. The special effects are goofy as shit. The dialogue is goofy as shit. You should watch Star Odyssey at least once, I think, because it does have a humor value. A lot of like shitty science fiction stuff really doesn't. It is extremely funny if you watch it. It is a great example of cinematic trash on display. But as for the two robot characters, Tilt and Tilly, they are some of the weirdest robots in science fiction. They really are just two extremely poorly conceived characters. They're not particularly short, but they're definitely trying to be C-3PO or R2D2. R2D2 because they're silver and kind of C-3PO because they're kind of metallic. But regardless, you can definitely tell, oh yeah, they're trying to be, the next R2D2 and C-3PO. What's weird though is despite obviously having like this extremely cute, toyetic design, they talk about extremely dark shit, like committing suicide, like just offing themselves, which doesn't, exactly like make them marketable to kids. So I have no idea what the fuck the Italian team behind this one was thinking. Yeah, you remember in frickin' Star Wars where C-3PO just starts discussing the futility of life and the weight of existence. That's not exactly something that appeals to the whole family. Maybe it is in Italy, I don't know. Maybe in Italy it's just considered like fun for the whole fam, and everyone just talks about being like offing themselves over there. I don't know. But yeah, these characters are just so freaking stupid and like poorly thought out, and the voice acting on them is especially funny. Unlike R2D2 and C-3PO, these robots are a couple, Tilt being the guy and Tilly being the girl robot. I mean, maybe R2D2 and C-3PO are a gay couple. It's never overtly stated, but that's a possibility, I suppose. But yeah, these two have kind of a romantic thing going on, and it just doesn't work. The voice acting is awful. The costumes really look goofy as shit, but you just know that they were trying to be the next R2D2 and C-3PO. Star Odyssey is a film that you definitely should check out. It's pure gold in terms of being ass. It's one of those rare, 1970s films that you just see it and you're like, yeah, this was the 70s. This is why nobody sees the 70s as cool. It's not cool. Like, it's just the opposite of cool from a modern perspective. The 60s are cool from a modern perspective. The 80s and 90s are cool. The 70s just aren't. Like, the Star Odyssey is so ridiculously lacking in coolness, and it's just a good example of how Star Wars was that lightning in a bottle. It was that one thing that just like clicked, it just like snapped. Everyone's just like, ooh, Star Wars. Star Odyssey is a different story. This movie is hella obscure and nobody remembers it, and nobody remembers Tilt and Tilly, the little robos, the little robo couple with the frickin' dark as frick suicide pact, because who would? Like, what kind of story is this? It's so goofy. I don't get it. Like, what was Italy thinking? At number 2, we have Tweaky. You probably saw Tweaky coming. I can't fucking stand Tweaky. Tweaky is so annoying. The Buck Rogers show is an entire other story in itself. It shamelessly rips off just a ton of sci-fi franchises. It's made by the same guys as Battlestar Galactica, so we get all the stupid Mormon shit in there. There's like an episode with Mark Leonard called Journey to Oasis. Very clever, trying to confuse people into thinking it's Journey to Babel, obviously. You got Hawk, who's basically a ripoff of Spock. You got frickin' Tweaky. Tweaky is a ripoff of R2D2, and despite being voiced by Mel Blanc, I like Mel Blanc. He's a good voice actor, responsible for some of the funniest cartoon characters of all time, and we wouldn't have Looney Tunes without him. But goddamn, Does it not work for Tweaky? Tweaky is ass. I cannot stand Tweaky. Tweaky is the worst part of the whole Buck Rogers show. It makes watching the show a real chore to get through. Of course, Buck Rogers tries to pretend and confuse people that it's the awesome Flash Gordon movie from 1980, because people always confuse Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon, obviously. But rest assured, this is a mile and a half below the awesomeness that is Flash Gordon. I've spoken before about how great Flash Gordon is. I think Buck Rogers also rips off Flash Gordon to a great extent. Tweaky, holy shit, this character is so annoying. Every time he comes in the room and starts, the freaking music starts up. There's like a theme song that goes along with him, like Torgo for Manos the Hands of Fate, but it just doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense. Who thought this robot was a good idea? It's just R2D2, but without like the charm. You know, the reason R2D2 is charming to so many people, I think, is because you can't understand what R2D2 is saying. He just talks in these cute little beep boop, you know, these cute little sounds, you know, just like, you know, he's like a friendly cat or something in a lot of ways. He's like a, you know, like an animal, you know. He just goes around on his little wheels, you know. He just makes the little, you know, noises. That's cute. That's fun. But then you got Tweaky, who talks in like, "Hi, Wilma, how's it going? And this like low, freaking, what even is his accent? It's like New York shit or something, like the fucking Bronx. R2D2 sounded like this. I doubt many people would enjoy Star Wars much if R2D2 in every scene was just like, "Oh, yeah, I'm R2D2, yo." You know, it's not exactly like an appealing voice. It's kind of grating on the ears. I think a lot of people who tried to rip off Star Wars just didn't really understand, like, very specific things that George Lucas put in Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope that make it, like, great and good. Every imitator just completely lacks that to just, like, a wild level. Like, none of them get it. And it's so weird, because, like, it's pretty simple filmmaking lexicon, you know, like, don't give your fucking little robot character this annoying voice that nobody wants to listen to. Because why? Like, that's just a terrible idea, obviously. Okay, time for number one. You probably saw this coming. It's WALL-E. WALL-E. Holy fuck, I can't stand WALL-E. WALL-E might be my least favorite Pixar movie. Not that it's much of a competition, because every Pixar movie is ass, and the only one I can even remotely stand sitting through is Toy Story 1, but aside from that, the whole ass Pixar catalog is just solid garbage. And I have a personal connection to WALL-E, because I remember when WALL-E came out. I actually do. It's one of my earliest memories. In first grade, we had this presentation about recycling. This had to have been like, you know, the year WALL-E came out, whatever year, 2007, 2008. The teacher filed us all into a room, and they were like, "Hey, you see this new movie WALL-E? He's a robot that recycles trash and turns it into little cubes. Isn't that great? Isn't that amazing?" And I was like, this sounds like ass. And then I saw the movie. I forget how I saw the movie. Maybe they showed it. Maybe they showed it at school. I fucking hated this movie. The animation, the frickin' blend of like real people with these stupid looking fat Pixar abominations that don't look like real people even remotely. Maybe it was just the depressing fucking story. Like, the whole ass world is just covered in trash. This little robot has to, like, fucking save all of humanity from like extinction. That's pretty fucking dismal. That's a pretty fucking dismal thing for a kid's film. Like, I remember that part in, you know, fucking Star Wars where, like, everyone is just, like, sitting around and lives in this lethargic society where everything is just like a living hell, and the entire world is covered in trash. That's not exactly the type of story that I'd call a rip-roaring sci-fi fun adventure. I like sci-fi that's not just fucking depressing. I don't like any stories that are just like fucking depressing, and I'm not even capable of depression, so I don't even know why I don't like movies like this. I just like stories that are like fun, you know, like Star Wars, where there's like cool shit going on, awesome shit. But WALL-E is like one of the fucking darkest kids movies ever made. Like, why would you show your child that? You want to fucking traumatize him? Hey Timmy, here's the story of the earth is fucking dead, and everything you know is fucking dead, and the only people left eat like fucking synthetic garbage 24/7 and live on a spaceship, and they don't even remember Earth or their history or anything. Here you go, have fun. WALL-E himself is obviously a little robot designed to be just like fucking, you know, R2D2 again, just a little R2D2 ripoff with his little beeps and boops and his cute little eyes, his little Pixar eyes, his big adorable Pixar eyes. Again, one of the reasons R2D2 is such a great character and holds up so well is that he doesn't have eyes. You know, he doesn't have anything even resembling a face. And I think this goes a long way towards, you know, the audience connecting with him. Like, you know, he doesn't have a face. So the audience doesn't know what he really looks like or how he feels. Yeah. But that makes him, like, nice to think about, you know, and nice to see. He's not like this big, mopey expression. Ooh, why would WALL-E even have eyes anyway? That you could just program in like a little panel for him to see out of or something. He's just a trash compactor. Why the fuck would they give a trash compactor these eyes that are like obviously designed to look cute? Especially since nobody's even going to be there, because WALL-E's entire job doesn't even make any fucking sense. Why do they have trash compactor robots on a planet that's dead? Why not just fucking blow the whole thing up? You fucked it. Yeah, WALL-E is garbage. It's an example of how to make a social message movie really badly. Like, this is the worst way to possibly convince anyone to recycle or put their trash in the trash can or whatever. You know, don't litter. Take a scenario to such an extreme that it just becomes completely disconnected from like the real issue. WALL-E presents a scenario that is so fucking depressing and hopeless. It's like there's no way to win in this case. It's everything is just fucking sad. Everything about WALL-E is just fucking depressing. And again, like, if you want to make a cute robot character, that's fine. Don't make it depressing. Make it a cute robot character, and then build a story around that. You know, don't just fucking depend on your robot character being cute. Like, yeah, WALL-E's nice. You know, I'm sure he's a nice guy, but holy fuck, this movie is broken on so many levels. I didn't even mention the fucking HAL ripoff. Hey, let's have a fucking AI runs a spaceship, and it has a red eye, a big glowing red eye in the middle of it. Nobody's ever done that before. A robot with a red eye that controls a spaceship and is evil. New shit here at Pixar, the land of innovation. Pixar really is a joke, and their foray into science fiction is as much a joke as their foray into every other genre that they mercilessly beat up and shit on and just like make the worst fucking cartoons. I have a serious grudge against Pixar just because they are anti-innovation. They are for the complete and total adoption of CGI animation at the expense of 2D animation, and there's nothing cool or likable about that. I remember I saw Up, and everyone was like, this is what animation is going to be from now on. This is it. This is the pinnacle of technology. This is it. If you want to be in animation in the future, Nicholas, you know, when you grow up, you're going to have to work at Pixar. You're going to have to fucking work at Pixar and animate the way they tell you to with their shitty computer software. And if you even so much as think about animating a 2D movie that looks good and looks cool and looks awesome, then that's like that's old-fashioned. Pixar is the future because they animate their shit so it looks like ass. It looks like processed, goofy ass. I think it's the same type mindset that causes people to assume that video games are great just because they're made on computers and they have this futuristic veneer to them. Same mindset that makes people think that computer animation is great just because it's like, ooh, oh, it's futuristic, it's the pinnacle of technology. I guarantee at this point people are getting sick of it. People are sick of every fucking cartoon being freaking CGI because it just looks so bad. And I guarantee also that the next full-length, feature-length animated film that's 2D animated, just 2 hours of good 2D animation, is going to win a fucking Oscar. People are going to be like, yes, please, please let us out of this fucking Pixar hellhole we find ourselves in. People want a cartoon that's pleasing to the eye and looks awesome and looks like, wow, you know, the brilliance of moving images. People want that, and when it comes out, it's going to win so many fucking awards, you know. Like Spirited Away. Everyone likes Spirited Away, you don't want a fucking Oscar. So if America ever does that again, instead of, you know, just everything being anime, if America ever makes like a feature-length, 2-hour animated fucking movie, everyone's gonna watch it and everyone's gonna love it. It was so weird growing up in like the late 2000s, early 2010s. You really had to be there because everyone was just full of fucking Pixar propaganda. I had this one class in like 6th grade. The teacher was like, oh, you want to be an animator, huh? You'll be working at Pixar, whether you like it or not. And also, you'll probably be making video games too. And even back then, I was like, fuck this shit. Fuck video games, fuck Pixar. I'm so over it. I want to animate a real-ass cartoon that fucking looks good. Anyway, a bit off track there. That's my thoughts on WALL-E. WALL-E is an ass movie. WALL-E is an ass character because he doesn't even talk. But unlike R2D2, who has, you know, C-3PO there to talk on his behalf. And C-3PO, you know, obviously can talk. And that adds a bit of, you know, interesting shit to the duo. A little bit of interesting stuff, you know, a little dynamic going on there. WALL-E doesn't talk, Eve doesn't talk, the Hal ripoff doesn't fucking talk. There's no dialogue for like the first 20 minutes of the movie, and I get some people consider that artsy. I call it ass. Like, imagine if the first 20 minutes of Star Wars that just follows the droids around before Luke comes into the picture, imagine if that was just completely without dialogue. You know, there's words, you know, like Darth Vader talks and Leia talks and C-3PO talks. You can't just have a movie where nobody fucking talks and expect me to, like, get behind that. That's lazy. It promotes illiteracy. Have your characters fucking speak. Write dialogue in your script, you know. Have a script where the characters say shit. WALL-E is a great example of just pantomime, pretentious garbage. It might be Pixar's most pretentious movie, too. I think WALL-E is the ultimate R2D2 ripoff because it really hopped on the bandwagon past the point when R2D2 ripoffs were even popular, but it figured it could get a bag, and holy shit it did. It was a cultural phenomenon, one of the most embarrassing cultural phenomenons of the 2000s, which, as I've said, are kind of an ass decade for movies overall, kind of the period during which a ton of just absolute trash came out. WALL-E's kind of like Avatar in that regard, you know, just a cultural phenomenon nobody gives a shit about anymore. But there are still people who are like, everyone likes WALL-E. You don't like WALL-E, Nicholas? You don't like WALL-E? It's like, no, I like Dune. I like Star Wars. I like Star Trek. I have standards for what science fiction I consume, what science fiction I consider to be adequate. WALL-E is a terrible fucking movie. It's depressing, it's boring, the characters are ass, the script is ass, the premise is nonsense, it's ass. And to think that people actually in 2008 were like, Wall-E is such a great example of a fun character that the entire fam will hop onto, and the whole marketing and everything went with the idea of Wall-E being this cute little robot that does cute little shit. It gets a little fucking dark when you consider that, like, Wall-E is a prisoner on a hell world, and that world is Earth, and everything's fucking dead. Puts it into a bit of a different perspective there, doesn't it? Not exactly Star Wars now, is it? Not exactly the quality that Star Wars set up. But another great example of the Disney complex just fucking everything up and making absolute garbage in the hopes that it can be as popular as properties it didn't own at that point. Wall-E was before Star Wars got bought out, so yeah, really a relic of an interesting period in cinema history. Anyway, yeah, that's my top 5 worst R2D2 ripoffs. There are a lot that I probably don't even know about. And like I said, as with Gremlins, there was just so many fucking R2D2 wannabes all just coming off the assembly line, coming in hot, especially after like 1977 and 1980. That's probably the golden period for shitty R2D2 ripoffs that just try and replicate what R2D2 brought to the table, but are really bad at it because, you know, you're not George Lucas. You're not going to be able to make characters as compelling as that, and also, like, it only works once. Same thing with Gremlins. A ton of Gremlins ripoffs out there. I probably won't do a separate list of those because there's a lot of people pointing out, the Hobgoblins, the Ghoulies, it's been done. But I don't see as many people really talk about all the shitty R2D2 ripoffs. I thought I'd bring that to your attention. Check some of these out, or don't. You definitely don't need to. Just watch Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope. Not on Disney Plus, mind you, on VHS with THX mastering the way George Lucas would have intended. And yeah, that's about it for this frickin' installment of the Nick Cicada review. Top 5, top 10 lists, whatever. I try and make interesting top 10 lists. Try and be a little more incisive than Watch Mojo, as it were. But yeah, that's it for this video. I'm out.